Welcome to TBC. Today, I want to talk about a new film that's been made by a friend of mine who's just a remarkable human being and a great film director. I don't know how she's managed to make and launch a film during this period of lockdown, but I also don't know how she managed to make such a remarkable film during this period. The film is called iHUMAN, and it's about artificial intelligence. And in fact, it goes on to talk about a new acronym that we probably all need to learn, AGI, which stands for Artificial General Intelligence. And it seems to be quite a scary thing. The filmmaker is my very good friend, Tonje Hessen Schei. Hi, Tonje, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. It's good to see you, Mike.
And you're calling us from Oslo, which makes me feel a bit like I'm in a global 24-hour news network all of a sudden instead of a homespun TV studio. How's Oslo?
It's getting pretty dark. But overall it's good. I mean, today is actually one of the first days where it's a little bit of snow in the air, which makes me extremely happy. So
Really?
yeah, it might help just brighten up our second lockdown here a little bit.
Yeah, the darkness here is also making lockdown more difficult at this time of year. I was actually thinking that when we were planning to talk to you, we should do it at lunchtime to make sure there's some daylight, because you guys only get, what, an hour and a half at you at this time.
It's not so bad, but it feels like it sometimes, for sure.
And you were telling me earlier that Norway's dealing with 371 deaths, which at one point I thought, well, that sounds like, God, damn close to us. Until I realised that in the UK, we're dealing with that plus a couple of hundred every day, and you're at a total of 371 deaths.
Yeah. I mean,
Yay, Norway. We're doing better.
here, in Norway, as soon as the pandemic came to our shores, we went into lockdown and enforced social distancing, I think, really quickly, which has helped us a lot. And I did tell you about the Norwegian sort of tradition
Yeah,
of
explain.
a dugnad, which is sort of the where you come together as a community and you either build something or you make something. And this is something that is ingrained in our culture from we're tiny, and is what makes things happen in our school systems and in the community. So with this pandemic, this is also sort of the Norwegian dugnad spirit at its best, I think. But
It just sounds like something.
everybody's getting really tired of 2020 and hope that the world will turn soon. So yeah.
Well, it sounds to me like we could do with some of that Norwegian spirit in this country, Tonje. We seem to be almost the opposite of looking after each other and caring about our community, which is probably why we're suffering more. But then I guess the vaccine is holding out some hope for us for next year. So at least it means I'll be able to leave my flat at some point and stop using it as a TV studio.
I hope so, Mike. I hope so.
But laziness has kicked in, really. It's just, I was thinking the other day, am I agoraphobic? Am I scared of going outside, or am I just lazy? And I think it comes back to the idea that I'm probably just lazy. Anyway, look, we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you and your remarkable film, iHUMAN. I just want to show a little clip so that we can get an idea for the film, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Humankind as a whole is not the crown of creation. We are setting the stage for something that transcends us. A new form of life is emerging.
Artificial intelligence is rapidly reshaping the world.
It's going to be everywhere all the time. It's going to hear everything. It's going to be connected to every single camera on the planet.
AI will ultimately be the best thing ever to happen to humanity, or the worst thing ever. That's why this is the most important conversation of our time.
So, Tonje, the first thing is it just looks stunning. It's a beautiful film. I've seen it now 2 or 3 times over the last 24 hours, and I came away thinking, what a beautiful film about a terribly scary and complex subject. We'll talk a bit more about the graphics and the way that you treated it visually later. But first, can you describe what the film's about in just 5 words for me?
Wow, 5 words. Well, iHUMAN is a political thriller about how artificial intelligence is changing our lives, our societies, and our future.
Well, that was a few more than 5 words, but an amazingly succinct description of exactly what the film's about. I think probably the most important thing about all of your movies is the way that you tell the story through incredible access to key protagonists. And in this case, there's 3 that stood out for me. The first of which is a guy called Jürgen Schmidhuber. I'm afraid most of them have names that I find difficult to pronounce, but a Swiss academic who kind of looks a bit like a Bond villain. So tell me a bit about how you found him and what his worldview of AGI is.
Yeah, so when I decided, how I was going to make this film, it was important for me to try to get to the inside of the minds of the people that are developing this technology, to see what kind of questions they are facing as they're working with the AI, to try to learn a little bit more about what we are facing as humans at this, as I see, a crossroad in our history. And Jürgen Schmidhuber is a computer scientist that by many are called one of the fathers of AI, because his neural networks have contributed to speech recognition, voice recognition, and also face recognition to some extent. And I met Jürgen early in the production of iHUMAN, and at a conference that was called AI for Good at the United Nations in Geneva. And Jürgen is a bit of a villain. He always wears white or black, and he also loves to provoke. So he definitely has some kind of a little bit of a cult status in the industry, which I found really interesting. And in the beginning, I thought maybe most people were just provoked by his viewpoints, because his viewpoints to me were so far-fetched. And in one of our earliest conversations, we realized that we both, love sci-fi, and that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is sort of both of our opening into, the sci-fi universe.
That pleases me so much.
Yeah, so then I was like,
I came after the first time I watched your film, I came away saying Douglas Adams predicted all of this. Basically, just 40 years ago, he predicted this was the way technology would go.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to that, but we can we'll probably circle back to sci-fi a little bit later. But with Jürgen, what I realized is that some of the most serious experts that I met through iHUMAN, and I did over 80 interviews with some of the leading minds in this field for this film. Most of them actually agree with Jürgen. They just think that the way that he talks about it is maybe a little bit, pompous, or, but when it comes down to the core issues that he's working on, they agree with him, which is pretty mind-blowing, because Jürgen's sort of the holy grail that he's working to achieve is to develop AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, where AI is just as smart or smarter than us, humans.
Yeah, I think he says in the film it will have the ability to improve its learning to the point that it will be able to create a better AI than itself,
Yeah.
which is a very Douglas Adams theme anyway.
Yeah.
And then it will start almost replicating and creating better children of its own. And
also, I mean, what kind of scares me a little bit with Jürgen is that he doesn't feel like he has a responsibility in this.
Yeah.
He feels more that it is his sort of duty or challenge to see how far we can go with this technology, which is pretty terrifying.
He says at one point, scientists don't care about regulations.
Yeah.
Which you imagine, and I thought there was another theme that I thought was interesting, but he kind of referenced it. A number of these guys and women were referencing the development of the atomic bomb. And I think you very cleverly throughout the film pointed out that these books were on their bookshelves, etc., that they were looking at that. And I think there's a general fear in many of your protagonists, but not in Jürgen, about what they are creating. You know, have they created the end of days? Whereas he doesn't really care. He kind of he says at one point, Einstein's parents can't be held responsible for Einstein's involvement in that program, basically.
And he also says that, you know, he's not human centric, and really, Jürgen and his team, they kind of feel like we as humans, we've already fucked up, and now it's time to sort of pass the torch on to an entity that is smarter than us, that can maybe help us solve some of the issues that we're facing.
And I think that's the most disturbing theme that comes out of your film, is that because if we look at another character, Ilya Sutskever,
yeah,
who works on OpenAI, which is Elon Musk's AI development company. He seems to have a disconnection to humanity as well, to some extent. And I think maybe there's a theme. I mean, you know, knowing geeks and nerds like I do, I wonder if there's somewhere on a spectrum that has a disdain for humanity in general. And looking at these guys, I'm thinking, I'm not sure these are the people we should have creating the next life form, because they don't seem to like the previous one that they belong to.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that, you know, Ilya is definitely one of the most, you know, intelligent human beings that I've met in this field. He does actually feel quite a bit of responsibility, and he also he's also afraid of how fast this technology is developing, because he feels like in some realm we have maybe already lost some control, which scared the shit out of me, because Ilya is actually the one who's kind of in the very front line of developing this technology. And if they are afraid, what should we be?
Well, Elon Musk himself has said he thinks that what they're developing might be terrifying, basically.
But another thing that, you know, I also learned through Ilya is also, you know, how so many of the computer scientists that are actually programming in the codes to our lives today, but also definitely paving the way to the future, they have grown up behind their computer screens. They are usually white, young, very, very, very rich boys, pretty much, with an extremely limited worldview and life experience. And if you and that's, you know, one thing that I really hope that people take away after watching iHUMAN is that this technology is run by this tiny little tech elite that is then again run by a few men who make decisions that, you know, affect most of our humanity.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the warning sign for that was Zuckerberg and Facebook anyway, because, you know, a guy invents a platform largely to date and talk to women, and most of his life he hadn't done that. So how did he invent a platform to do that when he didn't really know how to do it in the real world? And
yeah, I mean, we are dealing with the revenge of the nerds.
Yeah,
on a very big.
And one of the, you know, just to look at when we sort of sum this up at the end, in a way, I think again that's a common theme in here, is that, I don't know, I'm assuming that you approached a number of politicians to talk to and people in the corporate side. There's certainly a message at the end of the film that Facebook and Twitter wouldn't get involved in the film. But it seems to me there are politicians that simply don't understand this technology and where it's heading and the dangers and the risks, and they're not engaging in this, and our philosophers are not engaging in this. Ilya actually came across as the most philosophical of everybody of your interviewees. He seemed to at least be thinking about the implications of all of this. But it seems to me like it's something that we all need to get involved in and start talking about now, because there's this core message in your film, which is, okay, what kind of world do we want AI to build for us? And if we want a perpetual war and dictatorship, then the best thing to do is probably nothing, and we just let it carry on, basically, because that's the way it might be heading if we're not careful.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, for me, a awareness is our best weapon against the sort of dystopian world that we are heading towards. And that was one thing, when I got the idea for iHUMAN, was actually while I was working on Drone, which is my last film, about CIA's secret drone warfare. And when I was working on Drone, I was really fascinated by how the weapons were becoming more and more autonomous. And I had what I call, my holy shit moment, when I realized that AI not only is changing modern warfare, but that it is already changing our lives and our societies and, pretty much everything around us. And this was in 2014, and back then nobody was talking about AI. And I was just blown away how a technology could just creep into pretty much every aspect of our lives without us having a debate about it. Having always been super fascinated by AI, I was thrilled to go from a film that was going up against the CIA and the US Air Force. And I was like, okay, Google and Facebook, let's do this. Let's make this film together. Let's see, what are we facing here? And I have to say that what pissed me off the most with making this film is the arrogance and the power of these big tech companies. And when a company like Google knows everything about us, where we are, who we are with, what we are even thinking or planning or dreaming about, and what we are afraid about, and when they have all the data about us and they are not willing to answer some simple questions about how they are developing and implementing an AI in our lives, that is a huge red flag for me, and a big reason that we should be concerned and we need to ask these questions right now, because we are in this situation today where big companies like Google and Facebook have more power and use more money on developing artificial intelligence than entire nations. So here we are with the most powerful technology of our time, that is the most far-reaching and disruptive technology of our time, that we are leaving to technologists.
Yeah, and a handful of technologists as well.
Yeah, and they are operating with no transparency, no accountability, and no international regulations. So that's why I made this.
I think it's one of the thoughts I had after watching it the second time, in fact, was that at the moment, one of the I think the disconnection that we're talking about with the characters creating this disconnection from society, from humanity to some extent, that's reflected a lot currently. I don't know how it is in Norway, but I imagine it's a global phenomenon, in people believing conspiracy theories much more during lockdown. That there's been this huge uptick because people are on social media all day. It's pretty much all they've got to do in a lot of cases. The feeling of oppression by being forced into your house has led to a 60-70% increase in people sharing posts about Bill Gates trying to inject nanobots in you with a vaccine to control you. And the ridiculous thing is, watching your film is, you should be scared that technologists are trying to control you, but they're not going to do it through a bloody vaccine, because it's your phone, basically. It's the devices on your desk. It's everything you ever search for, look for, buy. That's the information that they're using to control and guess you. And that brings us on probably to, and we'll show a clip of this guy, a guy called Mikhail Kaczynski, who's a professor, I think, at Cambridge, and whose work led to, or supposedly led to, a lot of the work Cambridge Analytica did in influencing the Trump election and Brexit election. Let's just see him talk for a moment.
We are leaving a ton of digital footprints while going through our lives. They provide computer algorithms with a fairly good idea about who we are, what we want, what we are doing. In my work, I looked at different types of digital footprints. I looked at Facebook likes, I looked at language, credit card records, web browsing histories, search records. And each time I found that if you get enough of this data, you can accurately predict future behavior and reveal important, intimate traits. This can be used in great ways but it can also be used to manipulate people.
So this guy worries me more in a way than any of the others, because he's had a direct impact on political campaigning, and something from a Trumpton perspective that I feel like I've been almost fighting against to some extent is the memes and shareability of simple ideas about politics being shared amongst people that shouldn't be reading them and should do some more research. So a lot of his work is cited as being responsible for that. He doesn't abdicate responsibility for that. At some point he says, I'll just have to get used to that being blamed for Donald Trump and Brexit and everything else. The fascinating thing about Mikhail's work is he seems to be presenting it as, I'm just reporting on this shit. This is what's happening. But actually, his research papers are being used as the basis for campaigns, political campaigns, and for segregating. And I think in the clip we just saw, the idea that he is saying, I can tell a gay person from a photograph, I can spot a criminal from just looking at a face, and our faces are, and you visualize this beautifully, our faces are seen constantly all day long. This guy is creating a system that's kind of based on this 19th century idea that if your eyes are too close together, you're probably a criminal. It's a Minority Report thing, and he's just going, well, it's just, I'm just saying it's happening. Basically, that's terrifying. Did you find his work terrifying, or?
Yeah, I mean, to me, Mikhail kind of represents, the very core of the issue around what should this technology be used for, which I do believe is one of the most important questions that we have to ask ourselves today. Is not, what can this technology be used for, but how should we use this technology, and where should it be absolutely just banned? And I personally think that when it comes to reading intimate personal trait like our sexuality, face recognition has nothing. I can't see one single purpose of training AI systems to do this.
No.
And also, when I talked to Mikhail about this, he was like, because he sees that this definitely can be abused, and he said that he actually went to meet with representatives from the Saudi Arabian government to talk about how they need to be more tolerant towards gays in their country. And I was like, there's something that is very, very, very screwed when you think that you could just go and have a conversation and change,
But I think you said earlier the commonality amongst these people developing the theories behind AI and the technology itself is this sort of myopic view that it will, if it can do good, it will do good. And yet they themselves are predicting a number of bad things about it. And they're making stupid decisions like going to see the Saudi Arabian government and say, oh, look, here's how my software can spot your gay people in your community, and you should be nice to them. Well, they're just not going to listen to the second part of that sentence. That's not why they're interested in that technology, is it?
So I just want to say, I mean, Mikhail took his PhD at Cambridge. Now he's at Stanford. But and there's some really important questions around, what are we spending money on in academia, and how is it sort of bleeding into our daily lives through, for example, Cambridge Analytica. But one thing I have to say, it's also after Cambridge Analytica and Mikhail seeing how his research method were being used or abused. Then he goes over to Russia and talks about persuasion and manipulation of elections. So yeah, I mean, we are all humans, and there is definitely something that comes to show. There's a lot of money and there's a lot of power in artificial intelligence, and unfortunately, as humans, we are greedy. So that is back again to the great importance of getting some international regulations in place immediately before it is too late.
Yeah, and at least having this debate, discussing what kind of a future we'd like this to, because it seemed like they all were aware that you could set the parameters for how AI is created. It's almost like I think it gave me the feeling of almost again, a slightly scary genetic manipulation idea that you could put these parents together and then create an offspring that might be a genius. And in a way, they were saying, well, if you set certain parameters at the beginning, AI might develop in a way that would be better for humans. But they still had no guarantee that that's the way it would end up. They're just saying, well, maybe you set certain rules at the beginning to see if you can influence it.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that, I mean, that was one of the things that I really wanted to get across to the audience, is by showing, you know, the mindsets of these people that also are, you know, I mean, I love so many traits of all of the people in the film. That's why they're part of the film. But also just to show that, you know, this technology and you know, what makes us human basically is a dangerous combination, because like any other tool, it can be used for good, but it can also be used as a weapon.
Yeah.
But who is to decide what is good and who benefits from what is good?
I think primarily because, as you say, the money is coming from either the big corporations in the States, or the, you know, from a government point of view, people like China are investing hugely in this, and therefore not much good can come of any of those parents as a rule. There isn't a society, a Western society or a democratic society, trying to develop AI in a way that works for itself. It almost comes full circle back to your Dugand. You know, can you get together as a community of a democracy and say, okay, let's all build this together for our own good, and then we're all buying in. Whereas what we're saying at the moment is, okay, Facebook, build that, and if I like the results, that'll be great. If it kills me, oh dear. Basically, it's like we almost have no say.
I mean, it's one thing that has been extremely positive with releasing iHUMAN is that, you know, from the very development of this film, we knew that impact was hugely important for us. So we started working with Think Film Impact Production, and they have been incredible partners. So even before the film was finished, we were having debates with policymakers in the EU and in the United Nations, and also, you know, building tech partners like Microsoft to be part of the debate and to help us like shape the debate. And yesterday was a pretty huge day, because iHUMAN set the stage for a debate in the Council of Europe, where I actually got to be on a panel with the people that are shaping the AI regulations that will be put into place next year.
And
so,
Tonje, not to be too suck-uppy here, basically, but I did start this interview by saying you are one of the most impressive humans I know. And one of the things that you do as a documentary maker, which is actually quite unique amongst documentary makers, I think, is that you don't just stop at the end of the film. That what you do is go and take, you with drone, you took the issue out there and you became somebody asking the questions and authoritatively speaking on the subject about where we're going. And it seems that you're doing that with iHUMAN as well. You will be part of that dialogue now, as to many filmmakers just stop at the end of the film and say, there you go, there's my story. You know, and what you do is take it the next step and start speaking at the UN. I am not worthy.
Like that was really I am blushing over here, but you know, for me, I see myself as a storyteller, but I'm making documentaries because I feel like I have a responsibility to do what I can to make the world a better place, and the best way I can do that is by telling stories. But in order to make an impact when you tell a story, you got to make sure that story hits home to all the people that should hear it. So that is what is driving me, basically.
And now iHUMAN launched yesterday officially in cinemas, yeah, and is available for download now, for buying now, or
Yeah, so you should put up a link to Modern Films, which is where people can figure out where they can buy tickets in select cinemas across the UK,
excellent.
and also on VOD platforms. So
Just on launching a film during COVID. I mean, I'd love to go. I haven't been to the cinema. In fact, the last interview I did with Will Jewell, who's just made a feature film and released it during COVID, was the last person I went to the cinema with in January this year. So it's been a while since I've left the flat, let alone gone to the pictures. I can't wait until next year when you can go back and do that every week. But launching a film at this time, is that, I know you particularly like to be in the cinema and also like to be there and talk about your films, etc. And have you found it better, different, worse? How's that?
no, it's really sucked, basically. I mean, I spent 5 years making a film for the big screen, and I really think that pretty much all films are better on the big screen, pretty much. But I'm a big lover of the cinema. But with our special effects and our sound design, and that bass is meant to be felt on a really, good sound system.
Yeah.
And I also just love like going out there and actually meeting the audience in person. And I don't know how many Q&As I've done over Zoom, but it's definitely not the same. And I miss people, and I miss the big screen experience. But then again, I'm also so grateful to have been able to share this film with people all around the world. And I just have to say, the first person that actually watched iHUMAN was Edward Snowden.
Right.
And he agreed to be part of our world premiere at IDFA almost exactly a year ago. And then he also helped us when COVID hit to be part of our first online festival at CPH Docs. And his talk at CPH Docs for iHUMAN has now been seen by over 100,000 people. So that also just shows that there are these new sort of potential possibilities of reaching a wider audience that we have experimented a lot with during the release of the film. So I think we've learned a lot, and I have such a beautiful community of filmmakers in my network. So that's also been really helpful.
If anybody can make it work, you can, I'm sure. You just mentioned something about the special effects, and I think that's another thing that I took. We actually got to know each other on a course called ISADOC, where I was ridiculously teaching. I hope they make you teach nowadays, basically. But I was talking about social media and digital, and one of the things that I thought was stunning in your film was you probably have a name for it, but the special effect of the sort of growing neural network turning into the form of a human, but made of steel all the way through, and then it transforms towards the end into something that kind of is reminiscent of a human, but is something very different. And I just thought that was a beautiful way of explaining the sort of growth and development of this thing as you tell the story. Was that the intention, or have I read that wrong?
Yeah, no, it just makes me so happy because you got it. No, I have to say that the VFX in the film has been one of the big highlights of my career. To be able to create this and to figure out how we were going to visualize an invisible technology. And I partnered up with a Norwegian company called Rebel Unit, where the VFX artist there, Theodor Gronenboom, is just an absolute genius. Yeah. And he's been a creative hacker since he was 14. Where he's just been pushing his computer to do stuff that computers really shouldn't do in the name of art.
Hey, I make cartoons with physical light in them every day. That I was looking at that work and thinking, my God, how many computers do you need to process all those shiny little lights on stainless steel neurons? Incredible.
Well, his mind, and he was like a bigger nerd around AI than I was. So we had some amazing conversation and just trying to figure out, how would we represent the complexity and how would we be inspired by machine learning. And we also played around with some AI tools in the creation of the VFX, but we ended up with, the human creativity. And Theodor has worked on films like Gravity and Star Wars and Doctor Strange, and it was a blast, and I'm super proud of.
Yeah, I think it's a superb metaphor all the way through, basically, and it's as the story unfolds and terrifies you more and more, this kind of monster ends up appearing at the end. And I think maybe that's the takeaway, that these guys, Jürgen, Ilya, Mikael, they are Frankenstein. They are creating a monster. They've got almost they think they know what they're creating, but they're not entirely sure, and it may well turn around and bite them.
I also think, it was definitely a pretty, ballsy move to go as far artistically as we did in the film, because it has also, opened up the door for a lot of critics to say that, this is too dystopian, it's too much base, you are, playing around with this sort of monster VFX. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
And there are
And that's the
aspects
story
of
you've
AI that, terrifies not just me, but, pretty much everybody in the world. And the best antidote towards dystopian for me is actually, information and awareness. And then you have to tell a story in a way that actually gets people to feel it a little bit in their stomach. So
yeah, because and you do point this out throughout the film, that most, I think in the opening sequence, somebody says, AI could solve global poverty, it could solve climate change issues, it could help us to populate other planets, etc., etc. But it could also fuel a dystopian, perpetual dictatorship that we don't even know we're part of. And if AI decides that's the way it can fix all those other problems, then that's probably what it will do. And
yeah, and I hope that the audience goes out of the film and realize that, it is really up to us now, what direction this goes in.
Well, it's excited me from that point of view. I think I'm been looking for a while for a subject to pick up on that I could start to pursue now that hopefully we don't hear from Mr. Trump for a few years and I don't have to draw him every day, is to start to look at something that's got political and societal implications and needs to be addressed by people that kind of get somewhere towards understanding it and help create it. It's I use those platforms all day long. I am collecting data about all the people that follow my Facebook account, and I'm helping Facebook in that process to learn about the political views of the people watching. So if you're watching this film, Facebook knows you're watching this film, and they've probably got your telephone number. So you should be scared. You should definitely be scared. But there was one thing that I did want to take up with you on that, which is that it did strike me that because it's a competitive, it's not like it's a space race or something in terms of, or almost it is. There is a competition to create this AI that will be the big AI in a way. And one thing that did strike me that was slightly less dystopian about it is that maybe if the seed of each AI is, if Elon Musk's thinking is going into OpenAI, and we all know that he's got some slightly out there ideas about various things, and if I imagine Bezos is developing one for Amazon, and I imagine the Chinese government are creating one, and all of them have got this sort of seed capital inside them, which is about why they started creating this AI, that when you do create these superhumans, these gods, this super intelligence, then maybe they'll be like Greek gods. And we'll have sort of 50 or 100 different AIs, and they just fight each other, and we just get to watch and be pawns in their game. And they might be hilarious, like some of the Greek myths, basically. They might be devastating for the planet as well. But I'm not sure that we're creating a single entity that is going to control us all like the Matrix. I think it might be much more like ancient Athens with these slightly funny gods with humans trying to usurp them all the time. trying to switch the computers off. I don't know. Maybe it's a new sci-fi script I'm writing in my head.
Yeah, I hope it is.
I mean, I prefer it that way. If there are gods that we can throw Sisyphus at just to piss them off, basically, instead of, I think I can't remember who says it. I think it's Ilya maybe, that he sees the relationship between AI and humans as being similar to that of humans and animals, in that we don't dislike animals. In fact, we love them very often. But if we want to build a motorway between point A and point B, we don't care about the hedgehogs.
Yeah, but I think that is, I think, maybe sci-fi is our best bet in thinking about how this is actually going to come about. And I have to say, I mean, AGI is such a hot topic, and it is also one that most people really even avoid talking about, because the computer scientists get all like hot and heavy around this topic, because there's a huge disagreement on if AGI is even possible or if it will happen. And I have to say, though, after meeting all of these superminds that are leading this industry, pretty much all of them agree that it will happen. It's more about the time frame that they disagree on. But OpenAI and DeepMind, which is Google's sort of AI or AGI flagship, they gave themselves a 5-year time frame. Now, they didn't make that in these 5 years, but what I am also interested in is the amount of money that these huge companies are spending on AGI research, and also what kind of side products or byproducts are coming out of this that are affecting our daily lives, like face recognition.
Well, and deep fakes as well, which you highlight in the show, and I think that's probably the first wave of AI impacting society that we'll notice to a large degree.
But I just want to say, so I mean, I do think that it is extremely naive of us to not pay attention to what is going on in the AGI research realm, because if it is at all possible that we are developing a technology that might become smarter than us, well then, hell yeah, I want to make sure that, I have a say in how we are developing this technology and ensuring that we are programming our technology today with the right values, so that we make sure that, we are steering it in the right way.
I mean, it kind of comes down to Asimov's rules for the robot, basically, in that number one rule is you can't hurt humans.
Yeah. But
which sci-fi has dealt with a number of times by saying, well, the best way not to hurt humans is to kill all the humans, basically. So, it's like...
Exactly. But, a lot of, I mean, we can joke about it, but a lot of the AI companies that I met, they actually have regular workshops with sci-fi authors and filmmakers, just to get inspired and to see what is really possible in our imagination to push through, that is sort of based on science. And like Ilya was saying, it's like most of the sci-fi films that we have in the world today have some like elements of, that we will probably see in our near future.
Yeah, and I just geeking out a bit, I watched Star Trek Discovery recently, and the whole last series of that, not the current one, but the last one, was about the development of an incredibly terrifying AI that got out of control and took over the whole Federation. So I think, sci-fi has always been one of those places where they pretty much invent the mobile phone, and then later on somebody comes along and says, I love that show, I'll make a mobile phone. And now I think we're in that territory with AI. Is the more we explore what's possible with it, with our imaginations, the more that we will hopefully guard against what it can and can't do.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, sci-fi is also sort of this, I mean, it's based on our dreams. And I just recently met this wonderful human being who's studying global science fiction. And he was just saying that, he really feels like it is up to us as humans now to get to dream better. We have to train ourselves to dream better when we are imagining what kind of future is ahead. And I couldn't agree more.
Although just the scary Elon Musk relationship of having just put chips inside pigs' heads, basically, to read their thoughts. Maybe we shouldn't dream if we've got one of those plugged in. He'll know what we're thinking. Listen, Tonje, I could talk about this all day. I could talk to you all day. And I'd like to talk to you again about it at some point and see do a follow-up maybe in a few months once you've gone the rounds of talking to every parliament in the world and getting them to think about this, which is what I think your next project should be. But I also think you're working on a new film. Is that, can you talk about that yet? Or
I cannot talk about that yet.
You can't even mention it.
No, I can't mention it. But it does follow sort of my, I seem to have sort of a thing for kind of big power structures. So definitely continuing in that realm.
So you're going to take on somebody else scary.
Well, we'll see.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Tonje. We will put links under this and mention where you can get this film. I'm assuming that it's available in ethically sound downloadable places as well as the usual suspects.
Absolutely.
But I wish you all the luck with it. I think it's a fantastic project, great film. I would highly recommend anybody to watch it. And once you're terrified enough, come back, find Tonje and see what she's up to.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. It was lovely talking to you.
And you stay safe.
You too. You too.